David Brewster here with a new episode of Soloing Secrets, and this is Steve Cropper. A huge episode here. Steve Cropper is a legendary guitarist. His career started around 1958, and from late 1961 until late 1970, Steve Cropper appears on almost every Stax Records session. You got to think that's a ton of songs. Knock on Wood by Eddie Floyd, Sittin on the Dock of the Bay, Otis Redding. In the Midnight Hour, Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave Soulman, not to mention, working with Booker T and the MGs. He's a blues brother. Stax Records essential, session master. And, definitely, Steve Cropper's one of those guitarists, you can learn so much from just a little bit of his music. So if you're a Steve Cropper fan, an R&B guitar fan, or maybe you're just curious what all the fuss is about, this episode's totally for you. So just like we've done on other episodes in the Soloing Secret series, we're going to check out Steve Cropper's influences. And I had to dig for this information harder and deeper than I normally do, because it's not really that commonly shared as far as, his influences and stuff. So I really had to dig around. But there's some interesting players here, early rock, blues influences, country influences, from people like Chet Atkins. But here's some of Steve Cropper's elusive musical influences. As far as some of the people that Steve Cropper's worked with in his career, there's a mountain of musicians. He's worked with everybody. And you got to think, like I mentioned earlier, from late 61 to late 1970, he recorded all those Stax sessions behind the scenes. Not to mention, working with Booker T and the MGs as a band member. Born Under a Bad Sign, Albert King, that's Booker T and the MGs, backing up Albert King. So there's tons and tons of people. But here's an image with some of those elusive sessions and appearances that Steve's done in his career. Keep in mind, he's also in the Blues Brothers movie. He was in the Blues Brothers band. Steve Cropper's essential. As far as Cropper's actual soloing secrets, the things he typically likes to do when he grabs a guitar and plays a fill or a lick or a solo, and there's a lot. Definitely has a lot of blues influence and early rock influence. There's some country influences coming in. And minor pentatonic scales, major pentatonic scales, hybrid pentatonics, blues scales, emotive bending and vibrato. But then a big part of his signature style is like the melodic use of sixths. And he's done this, for decades and decades, his entire career. And that's definitely a very essential sound in Cropper's music. And of course, he influenced everybody and their grandma to start using sixths too. And keep in mind, definitely there were players before Steve Cropper that were using sixths. But he definitely popularized the sound and the approach. And it's almost like Van Halen and tapping. Eddie wasn't the first person to tap. Cropper wasn't the first person to use sixths. But he definitely organized and really kind of developed, that distinct sound and approach for playing. But anyway, here's some of Steve Cropper's soloing secrets. So the music and examples in this episode came from 3 Steve Cropper related albums. That includes his first solo album, With a Little Help from My Friends, from 1969. Jam Together with Albert King and Pop Staples, and also a little bit creeping in with Otis Redding too. So if you're a soul, guitar fan, R&B guitar fan, maybe you want to make sense of some of the sixth, melodic usage, or if you're just a huge Steve Cropper fan, buckle up. Here we go. I will break down and explain what I played during the opening jam a little bit later in this episode, but the first thing we're going to hit in this lesson is finding sixths and really uncovering where these sixths come from. And it's such a big part of Steve Cropper's guitar style and sound, I felt like this was the best place to start. And it does seem confusing for a lot of people until they see, this broken down and where these sixths come from. So what we're going to do is start in the key of E, and then I'm also going to shift this to the key of A. That way you can see it like in another key. And it really does kind of create this template on the fretboard, and depending on what key you're in, you can kind of shift these ideas into another key. So let's start in E, and what I'm going to do first is just basically take an E major scale, right? Right? E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E, right? E Ionian. So what we're going to do there is I'm going to arrange that scale on the G string, right? From G sharp to G sharp, basically. The first fret to the 13th, right here. So that's E major on the G string, starting on G sharp, right there. And then we're going to do the same thing on the high E string. Start with the high E open, and then just basically find E major on the high E right here. Right, there's your E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E, right? So now we found it on the G, and on the high E too. So if we put those together, we're going to find these sixths in the key of E. Start right there, that G sharp and the high E together, open. And then the second fret, G and high E. Fourth fret, sixth and fifth, so now it's kind of staggered there. Eighth and seventh. Double 9, double 11, and then that 13 and 12 at the end. So that's E major, but played entirely using sixths, right? Right? So that's basically where those come from, and you can definitely hear Cropper using those all over the place. So there's that position or arrangement. Now we could actually, extend that over to the D and the B string, and we could start right here, which that's technically the same one we started with on the G and the high E, right? It's just moved over right there. So there's, E major, but now on the D and on the B string. And it basically follows that exact same fingering pattern that we have here, but starting right there. Now right there, that's E, right? So if we take that, move it over a set of strings, and play the open A string, we can actually uncover A major right here. Just basically do the exact same thing you did here, but do it right there, and now it's A major. Same idea, but now in the key of A major. So this is definitely eye-opening to kind of see how you can take a scale, arrange it on one string, arrange it on another string, and then you start kind of piecing those sixths together. In E, and also in A over there. For a song example using these melodic sixths, check out the song Trashy Dog from the album Jam Together, the album that Steve Cropper cut with Pop Staples and Albert King. And during the intro, you'll hear Steve do this. Something like that. It starts kind of getting funky. Albert King comes in with some solo in there. But that intro part, like that. So he's basically sliding that F sharp into G sharp, that 11th fret, the 13th, and then catches that high E note. And then, so he's sliding into that E shape, and then he's sliding down into that partial D shape right there. So that's interesting. I'm hybrid picking right there. And then do the same thing into this E and C sharp. And then he starts strumming the G and the high E almost like a little chord, right? It's just two strings. And he's sliding those sixths right there. One more time. And then just start vamping on that A chord. Now Cropper typically uses sixths as fills. I mean, they do appear in his solos and stuff too. But this is from Rattlesnake, from his first solo album, With a Little Help from My Friends, from 1969. And Rattlesnake has that kind of obnoxious riff. And eventually you hear him do... really crafty. crafty right there. So that main riff is just an E to an E flat to a C. Like that. Kind of an ear-catching, cool riff. The song unfolds, but then like I said, eventually you hear him grab the C note, and then he's sliding basically this partial B flat implied into a partial C. So he's playing a C chord, but he's separating the notes, the root, and then that sixth slide into the remaining part of that C chord. And then do the same thing in G right there. Catch that single G on the D string, and then slide a double 5 to double 7 on the G and the high E. And that's an implied, G major chord right there. And then the same thing in F right there. Basically sliding that double 3 to double 5 and forming that partial, F chord. So that's a really cool fill. Using those sixths like that. Really cool. Here's another example using these sixths, and this is from Land of a Thousand Dances. This is also from his first solo album with a little help from my friends, and this is really cool. He's doing... something like that. So it's like a two-part movement here. So he's starting way up here. So double 10 into double 12, and then that double 10 is slid back into that, 8th and 9th fret. So that's tricky right there. And the trick there is keeping your middle finger on the G string to kind of make that transition. And then after you do that, then go to an A minor chord right there. Let that ring. And then you're going to do... And right there you're doing double 3 on the D and the B string. And then you're going to end on this, C major chord in open position and put that G up on top. Like that. So it's a two-part, slid sixth melodic idea. Really cool. The opening jam, that was Big Bird from the album Jam Together. We've looked at some music from that album. That's Cropper, Pop Staples, and Albert King. And Big Bird actually starts with this kind of droning, it's a fretted note against the high E, drone like that. So that's guitar 1, and then after that starts and it's repeated again, then you hear a second guitar come in with chords, and it's basically moving in the opposite direction because that was going up. Right, and just moving that note from D to E and then up to that F sharp to G to A like that. High E is played with it, of course. And then you hear another guitar move in the opposite direction, this partial E to D to C down to A there. And then you hear that and just like bang bang on an E5, grab that G and smear it, A, and then just basically pull off that G to the high E open up there. Like that. And then you hear this lead come in. Something like that. So it's basically riffing off that other riff that was the E, bounce to that G note to the A, and then you're grabbing that high E open. And he's doing this, right? And kind of moving that D to E and grabbing that G. And then you're going to start playing with those notes in a different order. Like that. And then... interesting to hear all that mileage just coming out of like 4 notes right there. Technically 3 if you just count, you know, that E, that G, and that A. He is occasionally grabbing that D back there too. You know, like that. And then eventually he moves all the way up here. And that's when it goes back into that droned, you know, string riff. That's a really interesting song, and actually jammed together is a great album. Overlooked, you know, if you're a Cropper fan, Albert King fan, Pop Staples fan, you have to check out, you know, Jammed Together. And Big Bird rocks. Okay, last but not least, we're going to look at some licks and fills from Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, the song that Steve Cropper did with Otis Redding. Definitely a timeless, historic, classic song. And this first idea actually takes place during the chorus, and you hear these double stop kind of hammer-on fills like this. That's really cool because the chord progression is moving from G to E, right? And on that last note, he's ending on that F sharp, which is technically the 9th over that E, you know? So a really interesting note choice at the end of that little fill. Right? And then you're gonna do... So he starts kind of playing with that little, and then he's going to move into this, and he basically moves that down a whole step and does it right there. And then this is really interesting, grabbing that F sharp, shifting into G sharp, and grabbing that E. And Cropper would do that a lot, where he would kind of start messing with double stops and maybe some sixths, and then he would find that kind of ending phrase, you know, almost like a cherry on top. Like that. So here's some sixth fills that appear in Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, and this is during the bridge, and you'll hear Steve do... So he's basically sliding into that partial G, and then sliding into this partial D right there, and then sliding back to a partial C, right? So think of what the full chords, you know, but he's not doing that, he's doing, and then grab those together, and then he starts doing... So he's sliding into that 7th fret, catches that higher, that F sharp, and then slides back down to that G and catches that E. And then he does the same thing over on the G and the high E, slide into that D note and catch that B, and then slide back to that C and catch that A. Right? Pause for a second, and then you're going to go into that partial D right there. Like the cherry on top right there. Timeless song and timeless fills from Steve Cropper right there. That's going to wrap this episode of Soloing Secrets with this look at Steve Cropper. Definitely a dynamite, very inspiring, very influential guitarist. You got to think the time frame when Steve really erupted with Booker T and the MGs, the Stax sessions, Albert King sessions, and all that stuff. Everybody stopped and listened to what Cropper was doing. Everybody, the Beatles, everybody was just really interested in what he was playing and doing. And so definitely, I mean, his influence, you know, was here in the States. But it went right across the ocean, went over into Europe and other countries and stuff. And there's something about Steve's style. You know, it's in the pocket. It's very simple. You know, he's not a shredder. He's not a flashy guitarist. But he plays for the song. He plays licks and fills and solos for the song. And certain songs don't even have a guitar solo because it really wasn't necessary or needed. But then other songs do have solos. So check out some of those Booker T, you know, songs with, you know, Steve soloing. Check out his solo albums and stuff. And definitely, he definitely has some solos hiding out there, but you gotta dig around for them. But then check out all those fills and the rhythm work and all the melodies and stuff. Great guitarist for sure. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.